For the last 6 months or so, I've been using two Traktor Kontrol F1's as my main DJ setup. I've custom mapped them so that they are controlling decks A and B rather than using the remix decks. I think it's probably the best DJ setup I've ever used, and I wanted to share with you how it's been working. So as I said, I'm using two Kontrol F1's. I've just got the one here which is controlling deck A. The setup's mirrored on deck B. So at the top here I have my FX control, and you can see that I can turn the dials to adjust the controls of FX Unit 1. Down the bottom here I have buttons to turn those FX buttons on and off. So controls the FX Unit 1 like so. Here we have the ability to control FX Unit 3 with the faders, controlling the knob part of it, and the buttons controlling the on-off switches. I can hold shift and use the buttons at the bottom to activate the FX units for different decks. So deck A, deck B, deck C, and deck D. Cue and play buttons, nice big ones, much bigger than the buttons on the Kontrol X1. Next to that I have the pitch bend buttons, and I've gone to painstaking efforts to ensure that the RGB colours match the colours on the Traktor software. Up here we have access to cue points, so I can set a cue point by pressing a button. Defaults to blue cue, but I can easily set a loop and set a loop cue point like so. I can delete them by holding the shift button. I can also change cue point types, so instead of a blue cue, I can just press this button and now it's a green loop hot cue. I can change it to a load marker, grid marker, loop or cue. You can also move or map the cue point to a different slot, so I can move it over to a different slot like so. If you want to get access to cue points 5, 6, 7 and 8, you can just change the mode, and instead of using the FX buttons here, I can have access to cue points 5, 6, 7 and 8. At the top here I've got pitch control, so if I hold this button and turn the encoder, you'll see that I can change the BPM in 0.01 BPM increments. Shift and this button with the encoder allows me more coarse control. If I press the blue button, purple button, P for pitch, P for purple, and press the encoder, it will tempo match the master deck. So just press and press the encoder and it matches the tempo of the master deck. No sync required to do this. The green buttons in the middle are the loop control buttons, so active, loop active on and off, loop set, and up here I can change the size of the loop. And I can also move the loop around like so. The blue buttons are for browse, so I can by default, let me just bring up a song list. By default I can scroll through my track listing with the encoder. If I hold the browse, it allows me to scroll through my playlists. I can open and close folders by pressing the encoder button. And the blue button and the encoder allows me to scroll through my favorites. The capture button loads the selected track to the deck. By holding the reverse button, I can move around the track in 8-beat increments. Holding the shift button and the two buttons here allows me to jump forward and back by 1-beat increments. Good in case you don't quite get your cue point. And the shift button and the encoder allows you to zoom in and out. Hitting the encoder will bring you back to the default zoom level. Notice that when I zoom around, the display updates to show me how far I'm through my track. So 54 means I'm 54% the way through my track. Sync on and off, snap quant on and off, and they're your main functions for playback. However, when you're getting prepped for your track, you'll want to find a cue point. So I can scroll around to the beginning of my song and find that point where I want to set a cue point. Now to get closer, I can hold this button and move forward back in single beat increments, and this button to move back and forward in 16ths to set my cue point at the right spot. So I set a cue point here, get rid of that one, actually might move that to there, and now I'll scroll back here to the beginning of the track, set a new cue point, change it to a load marker, and now my track will always load at that position. That's where the beats start. And we might zoom up here and put an outro loop. Setting my cue points. In terms of preparation, there is also a grid edit mode, so I can hit the shift and hit edit, and now I can go in and edit the grid. So I can go around and find a downbeat, zoom in, and then I can move around to find the exact spot. It's possible for me to let me just go back to the one where we've set it. It's possible for me to delete the grid marker, like so, by holding the shift and hitting this button. And now I can move around to the point where I want to set the... it's locked. So now I can move around to the point where I want to set my grid marker and hit the green button to set the grid marker. I can now scroll forward and back to see whether the grid is staying in line with the beats. Zoom in again, and I can use this button to slip the grid left or right, and this button to adjust the BPM of the grid. Once I'm happy, I can press this button to lock it. Once it's locked, I can exit grid mode, and my track is prepped, ready for use, all without touching the mouse.